Yeah, good morning from me too. My name is Franz Liedke. I'm 21, a student IT systems engineering, which is a fancy name for computer science, in Potsdam, Germany. It's right next to Berlin. Yeah, and I'm going to talk about FluxBB, which is an open source PHP form software. Looks like this. Um, yeah, it's used for, even if it's not one of the most popular form scripts out there, it's used for quite a few Linux distribution community forums, and its predecessor PunBB was used for the Facebook developer forums until they shut those down. So yeah, I don't know if you've ever seriously searched for a forum software, you might have come across it. Does anybody here know it? Yeah. Very good. Okay. Yeah, let's talk about the history first for a few minutes. It was founded in 2003, created by a guy named Rickard Anderson. Um, yeah, who created it because none of the existing solutions fit his concept of a forum, which seems to be a common reason for starting open source projects anyways. But for him it was kind of special because the solutions he found, they had too many features. And yeah, he tried to create a forum that only brought the very essential features a forum needs and leave out some of the, bliss and feature creep some of the other forums had, in his opinion. So, for example, FluxBB and PunBB didn't have a private messaging system, things that don't really fit into a forum, in our opinion. Yeah. So the origin of FluxBB is PunBB. FluxBB, the developers of PunBB forked in 2008 after the creator left the project, and after it was the rights to PunBB were sold to a company, and they had made some decisions that the community didn't like. So it was forked, and at that point they had an almost complete version 1.3, which had the main feature of being extensible, easily extensible with one click. Until then, that was done via modifications, which essentially meant hacking the source code by hand. Usually those modifications were packed up with really simple step-by-step instructions, so somewhat idiot-proof or user-friendly, if you will. Yeah, but one-click extensions were much better, of course. It allowed you to add features, etc., without touching the core. That was a pretty big step forward at that point. So the idea was really to provide a really lightweight and small forum core, which fit our concept, and then extensions allowed everybody to add the features they wanted if they needed them, but really create their very own forum. Yeah, to make a long story short, that didn't work out. 1.3 never got into a real final mode. It's still a legacy version, and we're back to the old system with modifications and only maintenance and small feature releases from time to time. Yeah, to be honest, that probably wasn't too good for our user base, and we we still have enough, but yeah, it drove some of them away. There are many changes of directions. So yeah, but why did the extension system never happen? First of all, there were some problems regarding the implementations. Even though it allowed you to literally drop code in at certain places via hooks, that was done with things like eval, which is not the best solution for many problems, or probably not a solution for any problems, but that's another discussion. Yeah, and also the rest of the code has some, regarding clean code, it could probably be better. Mostly it has problems like no separation of concerns. There's presentation logic and business logic all mixed throughout all the files. There's global variables all over the place. Barely any classes, and when we use them, we don't use inheritance, although we should have. Things like that. I don't want to bash the current code because it's really, I have a huge respect for the creator and the former developers, and it surely has a huge advantage too, which helped me personally too when I literally learned PHP and SQL from looking at the source code of PunBB and FluxBB, so it was really easy to dive in. This was the first question I asked at the FluxBB support forums. Now I'm lead developer. Yeah, that's just the beauty in my eyes, that everybody was able to dive in quickly and find things when they wanted to change things and make the changes easily themselves in just a few minutes. Yeah, but we have plans too, and obviously now I've heard about what things that are proper. I've learned things about object orientation and design patterns, things that are proper and not proper. And so we want to obviously do that in the next version of FluxBB 2. Okay, so let's talk about the goals first. I didn't explain the name yet. It's supposed to be fast, lightweight, user-friendly, and extensible. We're pretty good on the fast and lightweight part, but and user-friendly, I'd say it's okay. But the extensibility has always been more of a dream than a real feature until now. So let's talk about the goals we have for 2.0. Obviously, I don't need to say that again. It's the one-click extension system. It's supposed to not only allow you to plug in code at different pieces of the source code, but you're supposed to be able to do things like replacing core classes, extending core classes, etc. And there's lots of PHP magic which helps with doing that stuff, but it's still a challenge, and we are currently planning and experimenting how to do things like that. Next, we want a nice API, like basically encapsulating the access of the data, so that nobody who writes extensions or custom integrations has to know what our database layout looks like. Talking about the database, the adapter itself is in dire need of an upgrade, and we want to make queries extensible so that extensions can just request additional data, etc. I've talked about separation of concerns. A template system is part of that. MVC, etc. So that's also going to make styling easier, or allow for more fancy things when creating custom styles for the forums. Yeah, and then lots of features, of course. We had lots of features where we just noticed that things had to be better. For example, the parser, the search engine, tracking of read and unread topics, permissions, that's things we're working on, and pretty URLs, which is easy to do these days and which users have always wanted. Yeah, we want to create an importer tool for other forum softwares and old versions of our software. We already have a tool like that, but we want to integrate it with our installer to make that easier for users. Then usability, it's part of the name, as I said, and especially in the admin panel, there are things that can be improved, like want to do in-place editing of more contextual editing of things like forms and categories. There's lots of room for improvement, and we're still investigating what's best. Then anti-spam stuff, that's really a problem because it's hard, or I would say nearly impossible, to find a solution that fits everybody. And that's actually where I think that our extension system really fits our philosophy so well. That since we have no solution for everybody, we just provide the lightweight core and then have additional extensions that can combine by users in the way they want their forum to be. Okay, so we're talking about implementation. We first wanted to do an incremental approach, take the current code base and by refactoring put a new architecture in there and make use of new components. We have already created some of those for database and templating, etc. And the idea was to benefit from the existing code for all the features we had, so that we didn't have to recreate that. What we realized later, that meant essentially recreating an entire framework by ourselves, and it turns out we were a little bit overwhelmed with that task. So we did another one of those dreaded turnarounds, which the community also didn't like, but now we are busy going forward and using a new framework, a relatively new framework in the PHP world, which is called Laravel. It's pretty awesome. I recommend checking it out. The almost finished new version 4 It just combines very, very readable code with a very modular and decoupled code base that is also well tested, and still has a really, really nice interface for the developer. This is example code for, yeah, it just shows how to do validation and then redirection, a typical controller code that that validates a form, etc. Handles a post request. So it's just very readable and nice for developers. So the idea is to have a core package, which is a package for Laravel, which means it can easily be integrated with other Laravel sites, and then also ship a distributable version, standalone version that can be installed with Laravel already prepackaged. Okay, so a framework, of course, brings a lot of overhead with it, and that has been a source of many questions from the community. One of those was about the size of Laravel, which is a couple megabytes, but really the size of the files itself doesn't really matter. From my opinion, disk space is available abundantly, and we try to be lightweight about the features, not about the size of the package. That's more important in my opinion. On the other hand, of course, there's still that framework overhead, and that was, of course, the benefit of the old code base, which really had nothing more than needed. But at the same time, I think that, especially with our history, we have to make compromises between development time, which Laravel allows us to be much smaller, and performance. Yeah, also when talking about Laravel, it allows us to do some things that we weren't able to do before, like easily putting in memcache, for caching, things like that. So we can actually increase performance in areas that we weren't able to do so before. Yeah, and then also, if we have less features and if we have less database queries, that's of course going to be a more important source of performance improvements than micro optimizations in the framework. Okay, so things we're working on right now are as the so-called Alpha 2 versions. Before we started working on 2.0, we created a detailed roadmap with lots of steps. One of them is Alpha 2. We're currently working on the admin panel so that we finally have something nice to look at, to show to the community. Yeah, and especially permissions, we are recreating that system. Yeah, and of course we are interested in help too. If anybody of you is interested, the code is on GitHub and can be just cloned, and then we use Composer, the new PHP dependency management tool, to install the framework and all other dependencies. Yeah, so we are short on many things developer-wise, but especially on designers. So if you're willing to lend a hand with that, that would be awesome. Yeah, lastly, I want to close with some lessons I've learned during the last few years that we could have done better to increase community engagement, which I think is really important in my eyes. It's more important to maybe take 10 users and take each of them one step further closer to contributing to the project on the level they're at, than getting one guy and getting them to the same level of understanding the code that I am at or that other team members are at. So, and these are mostly things that I think I realized we were not as good at for the last few years. So it's not my wisdom, it's just what's lacking probably. So one of that is that, just what I said, inviting community members to contribute each at their level. And yeah, getting involved pages is pretty important for open source projects. We already have that, but just I think it's a good thing to have a page that just lists all the things that can be done, from not just bug reporting, but posting a solution, to helping other users when finding a problem, adding that to the documentation, etc. There's so much that can be done. Then raising excitement is pretty be good, just whether it's about new features that are coming, screenshots, things that other community members have done that can, yeah, just kind of create a sense of identity and community for the community. And lastly, documentation, especially code documentation, which is not something I've been too good at, and which is, yeah, just has to be added to allow new developers to dive in more easily. Okay, I guess I should get to work then. Thank you for listening. I appreciate it.